Want to thank everybody. Before we start, let's pray, and I'll be happy to just lead us in that this morning. Father, I know you love your men, and at a time like this, the world needs your men to be strong. And I just ask, Lord, that as we embrace the technology that has come about in our day and age for your purposes, that we don't lose why we're here and what we're doing this for. That even though it's virtual, that we realize that the men are still real, and they have real flesh and real hearts that need your healing, and they need to be made stronger so that they can stand up against the slings and arrows of the devil, especially at this time. We pray for our men who are isolated, that this will be an opportunity to free them from their isolation, and share hearts and minds even at a distance. It's awesome to me that the speed of light allows us to know each other's thoughts on opposite ends of the world at this time. And I just am grateful that we have this opportunity to keep your men strong. Help us to use this effectively. And it's your name we pray. Amen. After staffing a couple of events for Mark Men, one here in Texas and another in Elkhart, Indiana, we have Indiana on the line, I realized I wasn't alone, that there were a lot of men who had been through P1, many who had been through P2, who just did not have physical access to a P3 and needed connection. And so about 6 years ago, 5.5 years ago, I started virtual P3, and I did it out of desperation because I needed it. And it began with my brother who's in Ohio and myself, and quickly we added men from Indiana, we added men from Texas. We wasn't long before we found people all the way out on the East Coast, people out on the West Coast who needed it. And we've continued to hold this together for the last 5 years. We've learned some things about doing P3 in a virtual space, and we want to share that with you today. This session is going to be interactive. So as we're going along, I am going to pause to make sure any questions you have are being clarified. But I'm going to try to lead us on a particular path here. First, I'm going to talk about why we do P3 in a virtual setting and some reasons why we shouldn't do virtual P3, because there are reasons we shouldn't. And then additionally, I'm going to talk through kind of some best practices, some things that you need to think about as you organize a virtual P3. And then we're going to show you a couple technologies. We're going to show you Google Hangouts. We're going to show you Zoom, which you're in right now. We'll talk about the advantages and disadvantages of each technology and why you might want to use one over the other, so you can choose. And there are other technologies out there. This may just give you enough of an understanding. You may find another technology you choose to use for your platform. So with that said, I'm going to dive right in. Basically, I want to talk about why you're here. You're leaders in the ministry who are active in a P3. That's how you got invited to this. And so we're expecting you to use the COVID-19 protocol that the leadership has put out that was sent in advance to you. We want you to use that with your brothers. And that's this one here, and we'll take a look at it virtually. You should have gotten this document in an email. If you didn't, we'll make sure you get your hands on it. And then we also expect you to help other P3 leaders around get started on using this platform while we're in the state we're in right now over the next really half a week. We'd like to see P3s happen everywhere. We did our first training Thursday night, and as I understand it, we've probably already had a half a dozen or more happen around North America. So with that, that's why you're here. Why do a virtual P3? My main reason is that we've got Mark Men who do not have access to a phase 3. That's the big reason for it. And if they don't have access, I would rather they have this lesser option than no option. A man alone is a target for the devil. And giving a man a regular place where he can come, no matter where he is at, is useful to our ministry in Mark Men. So that's why we do it. Today, there are 2 consistent virtual P3s in place. There's the one that I lead every other Tuesday night on Google Hangouts. And then John Terravella has launched one on the East Coast of the United States as well, in the Virginia region. As we do this as a populace, we may discover a need, and hopefully we'll end up with ones that meet regularly around the world for the needs of men who don't have access to a physical P3. I've also found that professionally, there's a number of us who travel a lot. And while we may have access to a physical P3, we may be traveling at certain times and unable to access that. And when you're traveling, you're a specific target. You know that, and I know that, especially those of you who travel. And so having access to a virtual P3 can enhance what you're doing in your actual P3 while you're on the road. And I've led from hotel rooms, and it's worked great. And it's been very useful to me while I've traveled. And we've just discovered a brand new reason, and that is that there are things like global pandemics that cause us to practice social distancing. And by the way, fulfill Spice's vision for a cleaner world. So with that, those are some good reasons, and we may even find more as the days unfold for us ahead in this ministry. You know, we're going to close in on 20,000 men before we know it, and we're going to just have even more men who are isolated and don't have access, and this may become very vital to a core part of our ministry and keeping men connected to Mark Men and growing the ministry. However, there are some reasons to not do virtual P3, and I want to be very, very clear with you about this, and I'm hoping that as you do these, you'll convey this message to your men. This is not an alternative to a physical P3. If you have access to a physical P3, virtual P3 is not for you. We can do some really good work. You guys are going to discover you can still do really good work with men in a virtual P3. It does not equate to what you can do when you're looking a man face to face, eye to eye, belly to belly, toe to toe. It's just not that good. It's good, it's just not that good. And so I never want a man to say, well, it's just easier to do virtual. No, if you have access to a physical P3, that's where you need to be. I will tell you the truth. There's about eight men in the North Austin area who meet regularly. That is my P3. And I go to that one as faithfully as I possibly can, and we meet physically together. The reason I continue to do virtual is for other men who need it. I don't do it really for myself. With that said, I want to emphasize this is not an alternative to your local physical P3. It's a stopgap for men who don't have access. And the other reason is I don't want a man who's had problems with another man in his local P3 to say, well, I'll just not deal with that man. I'll just go to a virtual P3. That's not the way this ministry works. That's not what our protocol is. We have a clearing protocol for a reason. It's scriptural. You need to go get in your physical P3 and you need to clear with the man you have issues with. And you do not use this as an alternative. And if I ever find out one of the men in my group is doing that, they're going to hear from me immediately. And I'm going to say, look, I'm encouraging you to drop out of here and go back and get clear with your brothers. That's scriptural. You can't even effectively worship on Sunday until you've done that. So go do that. So some reasons why not to use a virtual P3. I want to be very clear about that. This is not a replacement. It's just a stopgap for our physical P3s. Right now, we need it. So we're going to talk about how you do it. Any questions about the whys and why nots before I move on?
Hey, Robert, this is Spice. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Just a quick question. We've got requests to record today's session. And are you recording it?
I am not. Let me start the recording.
Thanks.
I meant to start that. Recording. Oh. Okay. Thank you, Joe. All right. If no more questions, I'll move on. So talk about organizing a P3. Here's some fundamental things to think about organizing a P3. Operationally, we operate very much the same as you do in a P3. There's a couple of differences in the virtual P3 I lead. I'll tell you kind of the history of that and how we got to where we're at with that situation. The virtual P3 I've been leading, most nights we have somewhere between 3 and 8 men. It has never really ever gotten any bigger than that. And it is a bit of a nomad group, right? Weeks where men join and other weeks where they don't. So because of the size of the virtual P3 that I've led, even though there's over 40 men who have come through it at various times over the years, and we only end up with somewhere between 3 to 5 to 8 men show up. We meet for 90 minutes. When I started, not understanding, because had never been to a P3, so I didn't have the process well down. I was only meeting for an hour. And then I went to the World Conference a couple years ago, and Jamie White did a session on your P3 can be better. And I went to that session and I was like, yes, it can. It can be a lot better. So we extended to 90 minutes. If you're used to doing 2 hours, I'm going to recommend that you keep that. As a matter of fact, last night I met on this platform with my normal physical P3, and we were on for the entire 2 hours. We used every minute. As a matter of fact, it was about 2.5 hours before we broke off. So feel free to keep the time. Schedule your meeting. Once you get it scheduled in whatever platform you're using, send out pre-work. We do pre-work in virtual. I do send pre-work out. If you're not practicing pre-work, you can ask us about that after the session today. I'd love to talk to you about pre-work, but I do often send pre-work out. A lot of times it's as simple as, here's a scripture I want you to meditate on, and here's about 3 questions I'd like you to consider as you think about that question. We do that inside of virtual, just like we do in a real P3. And then the leader, whoever's going to lead that night, should log in early and be there 10, 15 minutes ahead of time. If you've got a new brother who's showing up to the virtual P3 for the first time, encourage him to get on early, make sure the technology is working correctly, and he's able to function. So I just tell you, organizing wise, it's not that different from a physical, other than getting the technology piece set up. I want to talk about some expectations that you can have from a P3. So one of the things I do, especially when I get a new brother, is number one, I do really prefer they have a camera. There's a couple of you that look to be dialed in and don't have cameras on here. You are not getting the effect that we're getting. We're unable to connect with you on a certain level because we can't see you. So in a virtual P3, I highly recommend cameras. Now, I'll be very clear about it. The platforms we're going to show you tonight, they work on tablets. They work on phones. We've got guys that are meeting us in their cars right now. All of us have cameras. There's really no reason not to have a camera. So if you've got a webcam on your PC, great. If you don't, maybe move to the tablet, move to a phone so you can use the camera there. It just enhances that ability to see a person, and especially when you're facilitating their work or they're facilitating your work, to be able to see each other's expressions, to read each other's body language. It's useful. So I highly recommend a camera. However, I do require the next piece, and that is you must have a headset or earbuds. I require this of every man. This is about soul group agreement number 5. It's okay if the people around you in your house hear your side of the conversation. That's your issue. But you need to protect the confidentiality of the other men in the room. So you need to have something on that allows you to hear but keeps other people from hearing. So I require earbuds. I require headsets. It's not optional. Occasionally I'll have a man who, the way he's set up, he's in an office or in a basement and he's locked away and he knows he's able to keep the conversation private. I'll excuse that, but I always recommend that you're wearing some kind of ear device for that reason. Pre-work is completely doable. I've already talked about that. Check-ins, you'll have to do all that verbally. I know sometimes when we're physical, we'll do some things physically with a check-in. We do clearing in the protocol. We'll do outside clearing sometimes. We'll definitely do inside clearing. You obviously have to do that verbally. Am I clear? I'm Robert and I'm clear with all the men in the room, right? So you can't do the sit up, sit down, stand in, move out of that stuff. You can't do. One of the things I just really want to emphasize about the differences between a P3 and a virtual P3 is you do not have access to the physicality. So all the things you're used to doing physically, you've got to find a verbal alternative for. And we'll talk more about that here in just a minute. Playing music as part of the devotional thought or the pre-work session is difficult. However, this Zoom platform that we're on does allow for it. I have not tested it, but I am going to show you today that that feature exists, and you could, if you're going to use Zoom, you could do that. I can't do it in Hangouts. It just became problematic, and so we just forewent trying to do any of that stuff. I know music can be an enhancement to the devotional time. I'm a guy who shows up on Sunday morning worship so that I can do the music. That's the part I came for. And so I'm into that. But just look at your medium, see if the technology's there. If it's not, don't burden yourself or the team with the technology. Get on with the other stuff. So I bypassed a lot of that with our virtual P3 for that reason. I'm gonna say this. We teach men guts, and we teach some great processes in guts on how to facilitate a man. You're going to have to give some of that up when you're in a virtual setting, because a lot of that stuff demands the physicality. It demands that we be present with the man. Some of the role playing we do will require that you be physically together. You're going to have to think around that, because you're not going to be able to do that in this setting. You want to lean more on the verbal parts of what you learn in guts. Many of you have seen the training that we've now added to P2, where we have the soul work circle. I've got that up on the screen now. For your basics here, this is a good format to use. But if you're a facilitator who's well versed at knowing how to ask the right questions at the right time, you've done enough anger stations to know how that's done, lean on that. This is really about asking good questions of the man and helping the man where he's sitting or where he's at in the room he's in to move out of his head into his heart. So you need to do that verbally. So I've put the circle up just as a reminder of how you cycle through that. But you can do that. You can do that very well in a virtual setting. You just got to realize you're not going to have the physicality. I've also put up this sheet. Many of you have seen this. It's been updated. You should have gotten an email with this update in it. We've kind of updated the questions. These are great questions to use. Last night with my physical P3, while we didn't meet physically, we met virtually. I put this up on the screen share for them to have. So as the men were doing the work, if they needed a little reminder of, hey, here's a good question, I had this list up there available to them. One of the things I want to point out that has changed, that's actually been added to it, is down at the bottom, you see the "Are you" questions. Those are great ways to kind of wrap up with the man. I actually used this last night with a brother. I won't go into details, but he had a conflict with someone in his family, and I was able to finally get it to the place. I said, are you willing to forgive? And he broke down right there on the virtual. And what was great about it is that was a signal to me, this is why video is so important, that we'd done our work. I'd gotten him into his heart, and it was time for me to get out of the way and let the Holy Spirit do what the Holy Spirit was going to do. So those "Are you" questions are really good when you're getting down to the end of a guy's work. So just use this tool. It's a great set of questions, and just remember, you've got to come with good solid questions when you're in a virtual setting. Okay. Any questions about expectations? I know I laid a lot out there, but I want to make sure that if you've got questions of expectations, we're getting them answered for you.
Hey, Robert, this is Spice. I'm happy to ask a question about my own experience this morning. We had 20 men. We have 29 men in our P3. We had 20 participating today. And it just felt like, as we went through the rounds, that it took a long time for men to check in, only due to the lack of fluidity, from being in person to being online. Do you recommend, breaking into groups? And if so, how do you break into groups, smaller groups during your P3?
Yep. So again, on my virtual P3 that I do on Google Hangouts, we've only ever had somewhere between 3 and 8 men. That size is really manageable, right? You can go through that process. It's pretty smooth. But yeah, if you're talking about a group of really more than 10, and maybe even a group that's the size of 10, you may need to break that down a little bit. And in Google Hangouts, I don't have a way to do that. In this platform, we do. And when I demonstrate the Zoom platform, I will show everybody how to do the breakout rooms. So if you need to break guys up to kind of get through things, especially when you get to the work rounds, there's a way to do that, and I'm going to walk you through how we do that today. Great question.
Hey, Robert, it's Jacob. Just a question about getting to the virtual P3 on time. How do you work through that? Let's say somebody comes in really late post clearing and stuff. I don't know if it's any different or how you work through that.
Yeah, it happens occasionally with what I've done. Again, I think if you've got a larger group, you're going to be more challenged with that. Usually, there's a couple things you can do in the technology. So on this technology, when you set the meeting up, and I'll show you how to do this, you can set it up so that when everybody joins, they're automatically muted, so they're not interrupting what's going on. And then when the conversation allows, then you can come back around to it. The nice thing about the pre-chat, like we have in Hangouts, where we can chat well before the meeting, is I've had brothers notify me, hey, I am planning to be there. I'm going to be 10 minutes, 15 minutes late. And at least I know they're going to come in late at that point. And I will be honest with you, I use our communication chat platform ahead of time, usually the day of or the day before. I do a roll call just to kind of get an idea of what we can expect, who's going to show up. So I do that. So that helps too. When you get into larger groups, I'm not sure, and it's going to be interesting to see what best practices we find there. Okay. No more questions. I'm going to move on to best practices. All right. One of the best practices I want to give with you is set up a file share. I don't care if it's Google Drive, Dropbox, OneDrive. Set up a share and add your men to that share so they have access to that share. If you're going to write a pre-work document like the one we have here for the coronavirus protocol, you can dump that into that file share, and guys can pull it down locally before, after, during. You can take pieces like our outline for how you do a P3, or the question model, and you can leave that in the share, and that way guys can pull that up on their computer. They can have it ready. If they're going to facilitate a man, they've got their cheat sheet with them to help them with that. So set up a file share. I can't recommend that enough. Now, one of the things I've done in our file share for our regular P3 is I've set up a spreadsheet that I've got set up like a calendar. It just lists all the weeks that we're meeting. As a matter of fact, I probably should open that up and share that with you. It lists all the weeks that we're going to meet for the next year. And it has a slot that says, hey, you can take this slot and say you're going to be the facilitation leader that night. And that way we can spread that duty around, and it's not all on one guy. So we've done that. If I were to show it to you now, it's pretty blank because the group is thinned out of late. And by the way, the fact that our virtual P3 is thinned out is good, because what that tells me is men are finding physical P3s to connect with. That's what we want, right? So my brother was a faithful participant for years. He's recently found a number of men in Ohio who have been in the ministry for a long time and have been desperate to get back into a P3, and they've reformed a new P3 out there, so they're meeting regularly. So he doesn't come to our virtual, and that's what I wanted for him, right? I wanted him to have that, so that's a good thing. So get a file share set up, and maybe set up a calendar. Hopefully, if you're just using this as a substitution or a stopgap for your physical P3, you have some of those things already, and this isn't going to last more than a month or two, and we're able to kind of get back to physical P3s. But I'm also hoping that when we get done with this, we have some men who are willing to kind of keep some regular virtual P3s open for the men who just have never had access before. Leverage the chat window. So I've got the chat window open here. I'm just going to type in a message. I'm going to tell you the two things that I use the chat window for in any platform for when I'm doing virtual P3. First of all, when we do the work round and I say, okay, I need your name, I need what you're going to work on tonight, and I need you to score it 1 through 3. As those guys state that, I type that up into the window so that everybody's got the list and we know who scored what, and we know what it was they said they were going to work on. So when we get to their work, it's there for everybody to see. One of the neat features that exists in Zoom, it doesn't exist in Google Hangouts, that we can use this for. If you notice, you can, I'm sorry, I just sent that to Gene and not everyone, so let me do this again. If you're not in the chat window, you should see this now. You'll notice that if you open up your chat window in this platform, you can select who you send the text message to. And so what you can do is if a man is facilitating, you can whisper in his ear over chat. Okay? So if the Holy Spirit's prompting you to say, hey, you need to ask the man this question, you can use the chat to send that facilitator that question and let him decide to work that in or not work that into the situation. In Google Hangouts, it's just one open chat. So when we do that, everybody sees it. I don't care. It's still up to the facilitator to figure out if he wants to use that question, if the Spirit's prompting him, and how to work that question in. But you know, we practice that in physical P3. You can actually do that in virtual P3 through the chat. Stay muted while the facilitation is going on the mic, but share over chat. So there's some things to use chat for. Mute the mic when others are working. Okay. In this platform, for anybody who's leading, you can mute everyone. Whoever's hosting the meeting can mute everybody in the meeting and unmute everybody in the meeting. But what I would recommend that you do in any platform is just you as an individual respect the guys who are doing work. If one man's working, another man's facilitating, mute the mic, don't interrupt them. If you need to get up and leave your seat during that work, I would recommend that you mute your camera too, and just make it so that you're not disturbing the work. You know, you wouldn't at a physical P3 go step in between the two guys. When we're all looking at the same screen together, you don't want what you're doing to be too much of a distraction. So mute your camera too if you've got to move around or do something while two men are doing work. The big thing I would remind you is that while those two men are doing work, you're supposed to be doing prayer. So you should be praying for them. Our God is omnipresent. He doesn't care that I'm not in the room with the other man. He doesn't need that. So leverage that. And then one little tip I'm going to give you here. We're going to do this today so you can experience it. Do the cheer at the end. It's going to be the most horrible thing you ever experience in Marked Men because it is not in sync. It just is absolutely a disaster. And it's funny and it's fun and it's still a great way to check out your meeting at the end of the meeting. It's just a mess. But do it, right? Keep that practice going. Everybody will get a kick out of it. A little more on best practices. So you should have gotten this handout. So in that handout, we talk about some things you should do. The brother and facilitator should each pray just as you've always done. The brother restates his topic in a sentence, and then make sure one facilitator walk through the areas, listen to the Holy Spirit, listen to your brothers, ears, eyes, and heart. You can still do that in a virtual P3. Paraphrase is helpful. Don't give advice or preach. I'm the guilty one on that. So this is the best thing that Marked Men has done for me is to get me to stop doing that. Remind them of I statements. Ask where Jesus is in this, and close your eyes. You know, I have guys close their eyes. Let's talk about roles. We don't do a lot of role play in virtual P3 just because it's difficult when you're not physically together to role play. However, one role model you can use, especially when a man's dealing with the lies in his head or the voices in his head, is we do the voices in a man's head sometimes to get him to hear the various conflicts that are going on in his head as he's closing his eyes and praying and looking at Jesus in his heart. So you can do that in virtual, and it has been very effective. So don't shy away from that. Just think creatively. If I can do this thing in a verbal way, how would I do that? And you can still role model that way. And we de-roll after, just like you would normally do. So that's all typical stuff that you can do. So any questions about best practices before I move on? There is additionally in the handouts we sent. If you didn't get this, let me know. We've got some other best practices and guidelines for the technology. For you to use things like one facilitator, mute everybody, use screen sharing where you can, and then I'm going to show you breakout rooms here in a minute. If you're using this technology, the breakout rooms could be very effective.
Robert,
Yes.
I've got a question. Would you usually sit on a chair when you do your soul work, or would you recommend to stand up, or how do you do that?
I am standing right now. I have a sit-stand desk. So the other night I was actually sitting in my chair as I did this. I don't get too concerned about the physical nature of things. What's more important to me is that I can see the man on the screen, that I can look him in the eye virtually. That's more important to me than whether they're standing or sitting. It can get a little bit awkward. It depends on how their technology is set up as to who can do it, who can't. As you can see, we've got a couple brothers sitting in cars. Some of you know Steve Coe out in California, Coaster. We meet at 8:30 on Tuesday nights Texas time, which is 6:30 in the evening his time in Los Angeles. And when he was meeting with us regular before he got back into a physical P3, he literally was pulling his car over in the middle of rush hour traffic on the side of the road, getting on his phone and doing P3 from the side of the road. And that's completely effective. My younger brother Terrence up in Dallas used to be a part of our virtual P3. He would leave his house where his wife and son were, go out to his truck and sit in his truck on his phone and do virtual P3 with us. So I don't really concern myself with whether they're sitting or standing. I do use close your eyes, right? Still want to help a man kind of get all the noise out and get into his heart, move down out of his head. We do still close your eyes. So that's really more useful than whether they're sitting or standing. You gotta be willing to let go of the physicality parts. I know that's difficult because we're all about the experience. You just don't have access to that in this setting. Any other questions?
Yeah, there's one for me. I'm Uli.
Hey, Uli.
All right. I've got a question concerning the entrance. How do you do that? Or perhaps I missed the part when you talked about it.
Yeah, there isn't a way to kind of leave the sacred space and then come into the sacred space. You can't do that virtually. We just will start with the check-in, and I typically do what I would do outside of the room with the guys. I say, okay, and we will pray, and then I'll say, okay, I need your name, and I need to know how you've been on mission since we last met, and get them started there, and have them walk through that. And we get that going. The next thing we do is we'll do the outside check-in. And then we'll then move immediately to, okay, emotional check-in or spiritual temperature, whichever we choose to do that night. And when we check out at night, we do the reverse, right? We reverse out. Where are you at now? As guys check out. And so that those parts of the pattern are still there. Those really don't change. And there's not a need to change them. You just need to understand that you're kind of compressing the outside check-in and the inside check-in into kind of one set. We also do the clearing. Are you clear with the men in the room? Are you clear with what's going on outside? We do all that as well. All that can be done.
Cool.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yep. Any other questions? Then I'm gonna move into the technology.
Robert, this is LC. I had a question.
Yeah.
Would you say that this Zoom is the best format to use?
So,
like better than Hangout, or I know that there's a couple other forms.
So I've been using Hangouts for years, and I'm going to talk about Hangouts next. The problem that we have discovered in Hangouts, I've just never been there before, is once you get 10 men in, you can't add any more men. That's the biggest negative to Hangouts. For me, the upside to Hangouts is it's simple. It's super simple, and the technology is really easy. You don't have some of the access to some of the capabilities here. So I think I would judge which technology you're using by a couple of factors. One is cost. One is the number of men you have. If you're going to have more than 10 men, it's probably best you find another platform. And this platform, it works out great for that, as you can see. So, and I am going to walk through this platform a little bit more too. I use Zoom at work every day, so it's been exciting plugging it in here and figuring out how it works. I did use Zoom last night with my physical P3 that met, mostly because I wanted to test the tech and see how it worked. And there are advantages to both. The biggest thing for Hangouts is it's free and it's super easy. That's their benefit. Okay.
Okay, but Zoom there's a cost for Zoom.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. There's a free version of Zoom, but it cuts you off after 40 minutes. So for a 2-hour session, you would have to set 3 recurring sessions and all that. So
Okay.
that's
All
one of the downsides to the free version of Zoom. Yep.
Christopher, do you have experience with Skype also?
Yeah, Skype has become, I have used Skype before. Skype has become a little flaky. And what I mean by that is I've done meetings with Skype, and the problem I run into is I'll get a lot of droppage. I've had much more faithfulness with latency and consistency with these other platforms, but Skype is an effective platform for probably a smaller group. So you guys are asking me tech questions, so let me jump into the tech real quick, and then if you've got more tech questions, we'll get to that. So Google Hangouts is what I've been using. I'm going to go over to the platform. Of course, when I had you guys join this, we were trying to do it in Hangouts. We quickly discovered once you have 10 men in the room, you can't keep going. A couple things about Hangouts that you should think about if you decide to use it. And again, you want to use this for a smaller group, okay? I love that you have the ongoing SMS feature. That allows you to have a communication channel with the men all the time. So it doesn't matter whether you're meeting or not. At any point, people can put notes to the group in there, and people can respond. My virtual P3, which you'll see right here, we sometimes will have men who will jump in the middle of the week and just say, "Hey guys, I really need prayer right now about X," and so we all get that, and then we're able to do that. So it kind of creates a group chat for you, which is kind of cool. One of the things I would do if you're going to use Google Hangouts is go into the settings and go to options and make sure your notifications are turned on. I leave conversation history on. That way it doesn't matter when a man comes, he can look at the history and see the conversation. That's particularly useful when you're sending pre-work. When I'm doing Google Hangouts for my virtual P3, I actually send the pre-work in that group chat, because that group chat is private to the guys that are in the group, that have been added to the group. And so I'll put the pre-work in there. Well, some guy, I may put pre-work down 3 days before we meet, and some guy may come in 2 days later to look at the pre-work, and it's now up in the conversation. So it gives him the ability to see that. So I leave the conversation history on. This last one, joining by link, is really useful. I would turn that on. What I've found is a man will give me his email address and say, "Can you add me to the group?" And I'll go put the email address in, and Hangouts doesn't recognize that email address as a valid Google address that's usable, tied to a Google account. So they get a weird email, and it kind of works, kind of doesn't work. So what this has done, it's allowed me to say, yeah, when you're ready to join, here's the link. Click this link. It'll take them to Hangouts automatically, and it will allow them to join the group that way automatically. One of the other advantages to Hangouts over some platforms, it's not necessarily advantage over Zoom, is it works on everything. Works on Mac, works on PC, works on phones, works on iPhones, works on tablets. I've got this picture you're seeing here is Brad Haney. Some of you guys know him in Indiana. Brad was faithfully a part of a physical P3 for years. And then he had a situation where at work, he got his schedule was changed and to second shift. And so now he doesn't get out of work until the P3's already halfway done in his area. So he can't access his physical P3 anymore. So he's been coming to the virtual as a way to get around the fact that he can't actually get to his physical P3 anymore. And he usually joins via his phone. You can see there he's probably on a phone down in his basement. So that was actually from Tuesday night. The chat, I can't pull it up for you, but I'm showing you in this graphic here. The chat is a little add-in on the screen here. And again, Hangouts is just super simple. That's the big advantage. It's just so easy to use. Set up a private conversation, add members with their email address or by sending them the link, and then send the link to guys. So that's some recommendations for Hangouts. Let's talk about Zoom, because that's what we're on right now. And there's quite a bit of features here that can really enrich the experience for you. So again, what you would need to do here is set up a recurring meeting. Let me bring up my Zoom box. So I have set up a North Austin P3 virtual meeting, and I made it a recurring meeting. The reason I made it a recurring meeting, and I'll go into the edit features and show you where I did that, is because this meeting ID will stay constant. And so even though we're going to meet every Friday, it's always the same meeting ID. It doesn't change. So that's why you want to set it up recurring. Otherwise, every week you've got a new meeting ID and guys may not be able to get in. They're sending you text messages going, I can't get in, send me the ID. By making it a recurring meeting, you keep it that way. Let me show you the setup features. So when you set up a meeting, you get, you can name it for what you want it to be, and then immediately set it to recurring. I have it generate an ID, although Zoom gives you a personal ID. You could keep your personal ID as the ID. I just have it generate a meeting ID for this meeting since I'm setting it up as recurring. And then I give it a password. You don't have to give it a password. That's not required. It will auto-generate a password for you. I would make that, you can change it. I would make it simple. North Austin P3 is what I did there for ours. Again, the reason I decided to go ahead and set a password is I really want to make sure that this meeting's private. I don't want somebody just straying in on this thing. They need to have that extra piece of information to get in. Under the video settings, I set video on automatically for the host, and I set video on automatically for the participants. So if they've got a camera, it just turns their camera on automatically when they join. They don't have to go fumble around and figure out how to turn their camera on. I locked this down to computer audio, which will use the phone's audio or the tablet's audio or the PC's audio. The reason I did that, people have asked me, is it okay for somebody to telephone in? It is. You're just not getting a real solid experience with that. So I highly discourage it. Zoom allows me to say, I don't want any telephones dialing in. So I'm able to kind of control that. So that's why I set that way. If you're using a calendar platform, you can have the meeting automatically added to your calendar. I'm using Google Calendar, so I turn that on. Down here under advanced options, enable join before host. I would check that. What that means is if you haven't gotten on the session yet and somebody's trying to join early, they're allowed to go ahead and get in the meeting room. They're not sitting in a waiting room wondering, is anybody going to ever let them in? Just lets them get into the meeting room automatically. Also, if something happens and you're not able to arrive at the meeting, the others can get in and they're able to have a meeting without you. So, you know, if we have a space we use physically, this is my virtual space. I want guys to be able to get in that space when they arrive. So that's why I set that up to enable others to join before host. I also check mute the participants when they enter. That way, if a guy comes in late, we're not having to listen to his kids in the background yelling and screaming just because he's still trying to figure out where everything's at. He's just automatically muted when he shows up and he's got to unmute himself, or I've got to unmute him as the host. So I would set that up. You can record meetings. Obviously, we're going to say if you've got a virtual P3, it's probably not a good idea to record it. Little thing called Soul Group Agreement number 5. The neat thing is you can turn on an alternative host. So this meeting you guys are in, I own this instance. This is on my account. We're going to use this account to do Texas P3s. So if the guys down in Houston want to leverage this, we could set up a recurring meeting for them, and I could put in the email address of one of them, and they would become the host automatically when they join, which would allow them to have all the control I would have if I were there. And then I don't have to show up at the Houston P3. They're able to do that without me. So that's a neat feature that you have in there. I want to show you a couple of other cool features. I'm going to try to demonstrate these as best I can. Can you guys see the chat window on your screen? Okay, good. So this is what my chat window looks like. I'm able to see things. There's a note that Spice has sent here to everyone. Pay attention to that. One of the things I'm going to do now, though, is I'm going to open up what's called breakout rooms, and I'm hoping you can see that. Are you guys seeing my dialogue for breakout rooms? You're not. Okay, I'm going to walk you through this. So before the meeting started, I told the system I want to have 2 breakout rooms. And I'm able to actually give them a name. I'm going to call the first one Soul Group 1. And I'm going to call the second one, I know you guys can't see this. Just trust me, when you go in and use this, you'll see it. Soul Group 2.
Robert, this is Ray. While you'll do that, man, you've got to set up the ability to do breakout rooms in your settings.
Yes, I'll show you that.
I did not do that. I mean, I learned that through this process, but that and there's also a feature, Robert, you may talk about called polling, Polling.
Yes.
That could be very handy, but those got to be set up in advance of starting a call.
Okay, so I have set up Soul Group 1, and what I've done is I've clicked what's called an assign button, and I get a list of everybody who's here. Okay, so in Soul Group number 1, I've put Dano, Ray, and Scott McKenzie, and I'm also going to assign Soul Group number 2, and I'm going to do Don Morell, Gene Shea, and we'll just do the 2 of them. They're going to go do a clearing. And so now if I open those rooms, you guys will be able to look around and see they're going to disappear from your screen because they're going to go over to another room. Gentlemen, before I send you over there, when you get over there, down where you have the leave meeting button on your screen down in the lower right-hand corner, you'll see the leave room, which will send you back into this room. So once you guys get over there, come back. So I've opened the rooms. 32 of us are unassigned. Those other guys have now been popped into the rooms. They've disappeared from our screen. I can actually see who's in what room because it goes green on my screen. So you can verify if you're hosting that the men got in the room that they were supposed to get in, and they can all come back. Now, I'll share this again when they all get back. They can leave the meeting room, but right now they can go have a separate soul work session from the main room. So if you've got a large group, that's a useful feature, the breakout rooms, allowing guys to kind of go off to a separate room and do some soul work over there. Now, if I close these rooms, anybody who's in those rooms will pop back over here automatically. So when a soul group gets done, they can come back to the main room and be ready to do more larger group work when they get back here. So Ray has come back, Scott McKenzie has come back, I think Spice has come back, Don Morell and Gene Shea are still in their room, and I'm going to close the room, and that should send them all back here. They're going to get a countdown for 60 seconds that says, hey, this room is going away in 60 seconds, and they'll be sent back over to this room. So I wanted to show the breakout rooms to you. If you, like Ray was saying, if you don't turn on the break rooms in your settings, I'm going to show you how to do that. But if you don't turn on the break rooms in your settings, you won't see the break room option in your tools. So I'm gonna go over and show you how to do that now. I think we've got everybody back. Yes.
Robert, this is LC. Are you able to speak to the guys in their rooms? Like,
I would
let's
have.
say you want to make an announcement to,
Yes.
4 different rooms at the same time. Can you do that?
You can do a broadcast text message that will broadcast to all the rooms. That's what you can do.
And the other thing too, LC, is as the host, you can actually jump into multiple breakout rooms yourself.
Yep.
Okay.
So it's pretty cool, the features that are in there. All right.
Robert, how do you set up a recurring meeting when you meet only twice a month?
Twice a month?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you can. I haven't looked, but I think you can set it for weekly every 2 weeks. I'll have to look at that. It probably has a lot to do with your calendaring function on your calendar. But let me go into the settings here. Hopefully you guys are able to see this. You may not be able to see it, but I'm gonna go in and edit this meeting. No, I did that already. Let me
Robert,
yep.
What I have found using this in other settings in my business, sometimes when I'm sharing my screen, which what you are doing, if I change to a different screen, I almost got to stop sharing and then restart sharing.
Okay.
So just FYI, if I go from Safari and then I want to show something in Word, I have found in the past that I need to stop and then restart sharing, and it works fine. So you may be running. I now see your screen. So
yeah. So this is I just went to a browser screen here. I want to show you guys the plans real quick. So the Pro plan is $15 a month. You can buy it annually. One of the things I did I use a piece of software called Wikibuy, and there's another one called Honey. If you're using either of those, one of the nice things is when you go to buy your pro account, if you'll kick off Wikibuy or kick off Honey, it will go through a bunch of coupon codes and try to find you a coupon. I got it down to about $12.50 a month, and I went ahead and bought it annually for the state of Texas.
And Robert, one thing you might want to clarify is that breakout room option is only for the pro version. It's not.
It's only in the pro version. That's true. You can't do that for the free version. Again, the free version limits you to 40 minutes for a group meeting. It'll cut you off at 40 minutes. So you'd have to then start another meeting afterwards.
Hey, I'm not sure if you covered this when I was in the breakout room, Robert. I think the thing that's also helpful is you can auto sort the folks to go into the breakout rooms, so you don't have to individually move people, but you can certainly slide people over after they automatically divide them.
Yes. Yep. And we talked about how you can bring them back too. You can close the rooms and bring them back automatically. Sign in. Let me sign back into my account here.
Hey, Robert, just an FYI, we did a test run last night with our phase 3, and it let us go over 40 minutes.
It will let you do that once or twice, and then it'll.
Oh, okay. So today we went 2.5 hours, and it still let us. So.
Yeah, it lets you do that initially on a free account to get you in there, and it kind of warns you, hey, this could happen. Okay. Why am I not able to log into my account? I was just logged in a moment ago. Oh, because I'm logging in with the wrong password. That's why. What I wanted to do was show you the settings. So when you go into your account profile, you get this window. If you'll go to the settings here, this is where you can turn some of these things on and off. One of the things I did is I went down to breakouts. I forget how far down it is. If you see it, and I'm rolling past it, here it is. So in meeting, there's a breakout room. I had to turn that on in order for it to be active in this panel where I could control it. But you can control a lot of very crucial settings here for your meetings from the settings there. So that's where you do that. If you don't turn that on there, you won't see breakouts as an option in your thing. We also talked about polls. You turn on polling in here as well, but I could set up a poll right now. I could ask a question. Let me do this. Rate the meeting, and
yeah, I was thinking about this for like spiritual temperature or different things like that. It's a quick way to just do a quick assessment. Or something related to your scripture for that evening.
Yes. So I'm going to set up a quick poll, and I'm going to activate it here, and you guys should see that poll come up on your end, and then you would be able to tell me whether it was great, awesome, or incredible today. Okay, so you can do that. All right, so that is these two forms of technology. Any questions?
Where would the poll show up?
I don't know. I just did it. Did it not send it? Let me poll launch. I needed to launch it. So you can set the poll up ahead of time, and then when you're ready for it, you can launch it. And now you guys have it. And right now we're coming in at looks like it was incredible. So,
Yeah,
so there you go. Yeah, so there you go, right? And then I can end the poll. I've got control to end the poll too. An awesome one at 38%. So great. All right, I'm going to open it up. We're past the hour. Yeah, I believe you'll have to specify who each time you have that. So that just be something you'll want to go in and edit your settings on. You know, when you're doing that, or you can set up separate meetings on the calendar and use your personal ID, so the ID is always the same, and then just set each one of those with who's the host going to be that week. You could do that too.
Robert, Lucas, any thoughts about confidentiality regarding the systems? I mean, the one thing is that nobody else is listening in your room, and the other thing is, I mean, we are in the virtual space, which can be hacked or whatever. Do you have any thoughts about this?
Yeah, we do have a risk there, right? As any virtual tool would. You know, that's why, you know, I try to keep the groups I set up private to kind of limit the exposure. But obviously, any of these systems is hackable. And again, that's another reason to emphasize this should not replace a physical P3. If you have access to a physical P3, that's where you should meet. You should be using this strictly for men who don't have access. I absolutely think you should be in a physical P3. It's this versus nothing.
Hey, Robert, any tips? This is Patrick. Make sure I'm on. Any tips for, I mean, I'm just, navigating what I'm visualizing, seeing. I pop in between your, your screen share and your face, or I can open it up and see, and dial through everybody's face. But if I do that, whoever's talking doesn't show up green or, live. Is there any tips just in terms of visual? How do you generally?
I assume you're using a free account right now on your end?
I am.
Okay, so what controls you have, I may not be clear on. Last night when I was doing this, all the men who were attached to my group were able to go to a speaker view in the panel. And by going to a speaker view, you could see all the strip of the little guys that you could pan through all their cameras, but whoever was speaking was on a bigger screen prioritized. So you may want to use that. When I was facilitating a man last night, I definitely went to that view because I was more interested in what was happening on his camera than anybody else's camera. Yep.
Thanks.
Robert, this is Frank. Did you also consider to use Teams as alternative for Hangouts or Zoom?
Yeah, if somebody's got access to Teams, that could be a awesome platform. I'm pretty new to Teams. We've just started using that at Dell. Our IT department has gimped most of the features. They're turning them on over time. So I haven't gotten the full capability of that yet. But if you have the ability to video conference in Teams, that could be a viable alternative. There's a number of technologies out there. I don't think the technology is as critical as just understanding the process and the things you've got to consider, because no matter which platform you use, you just have to realize you don't have the physicality. How do you do this without that? How do you verbalize the right things?
Yes, this is correct. But the first step is to choose the software. It's the first step we have to do.
Yep, absolutely. But if Teams lets you do video conferencing and you have that ability, and so do the men in your group, I think that's a great option to use. I know that in the Microsoft world, it's slowly replacing Skype. So.
And this is Winfried. Just a small comment from my side. I also know quite a few of these technologies. Zoom is the only one that I know about that has the breakout rooms. So I know of no other technology that offers that one. So if you want to have that one, probably you have to go for Zoom. At least I'm not aware of having that feature. And not neither Zoom nor Skype nor Hangout nor Cisco WebEx. So this is the ones that I'm using frequently. They don't have that option.
Yeah. So determine the size of your group. Again, if you're somewhere between 6-8 men, you can probably just stay in one room and do things effectively. It's once you get past that, I appreciate that it helps to kind of be able to get everybody in time by breaking out the groups. I haven't ever run into it. So I want that problem to exist for me someday. So. Okay, let me go over some what you should do next, and then we'll wrap up. I was going to have us do a full checkout. We won't do a full checkout because we're running out of we're past time here. Set up your meeting. That's the first thing you need to do. Set up your meeting. When are you meeting? Get it set up. Get it on a calendar. set up a file share if you don't have one already, and add your men to the file share so they can access stuff. I found in the middle of the meeting last night, we were having a conversation, and I would add files as we were going for them to be able to pull down on their end. So have a file share that guys can access. Set up your calendar if your meeting's going to be extended. If you're only doing this for a few weeks, you may not want to get too terribly sophisticated with a calendar. But if you're going to be doing this for any extended period of time, set up a calendar. Invite your men. Invite your men, and when you're inviting them, make sure you communicate. You need a camera, and you absolutely have to have a headset, some kind of earbuds or headset. I can't stress that enough. There's nothing worse than a guy showing up for the first time and he doesn't have that equipment in place, and it's like, guy, you're not protecting the rest of us. So, you know, we're going to ask you to leave. I'd rather they be prepared. Make sure they have those in place. When we decided to go virtual this week, I sent a note to my team, and one of the guys said, I assume I'm going to need a camera. And I said, yes, you're also going to need a headset. And he goes, yeah, I'm out Friday night. I'll get my stuff together so I can be back in a week. Because he's going to be in his house with his wife and daughter, and he just needed to protect everybody. Join early if you're the host. Get on there early. If a guy's coming on for the first time and is not used to the tech, he may need a few minutes of your help to kind of get his tech working. And then have a virtual P3. So any other questions? This was great.
As the Winfried, very briefly, just a request. Can you make the PowerPoint available as well, Robert? It's great, just as a reminder.
I can. We edited it today after Thursday, so now I think we've got a better deck. So I will send that. Actually, Spice has the latest copy of that, so I'll let him distribute that out to you guys as he's using the mailing list. So we'll be happy to share that with you, especially if you're going to use this to help other guys get set up and running. So feel free. Yeah. Okay. What we're going to do now is we're going to do the group cheer. I'm going to pray first, but we're going to do the group cheer just so you can say, now I know what you're talking about. Let me pray. God, thank you for these leaders. These men love your men. And I know that you use them powerfully to do your work in the kingdom. Each man has his mission and his role. All those pieces are required. You've put them in place for a reason. And I just ask, Lord, that we're able to leverage this technology to stay connected. May our hearts for men who are alone grow so that we will understand that isolation can be good for a short period, but for a long period is usually a disaster for a man, and we need to give them an escape from their isolation and a way to check in and be connected again, to move through their emotions. I know I've talked to a lot of men over the last week who are feeling anxious. Some are feeling angry because of the circumstances they're in, and they need a way to pour that cup out. And may we be able to use this for them and for your purposes, Lord. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Well done.
Right. Hand in. Put it in there. Jesus. Be strong. Strengthen one another. Oh, it's just horrible.
Thank you, Robert.